Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Marie Briel.
And I'm Heidi Henry, coming to you from two separate studios at the edge of the Great Red Divide. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we bring you progressive news and views that you can use. You can find all of our previous episodes at Heartland Mamas, MAMAS.com, on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and proudly part of the Demcast USA network. So, Murray, today we're going to talk about one of those buzzword topics that has been filling our airwaves and our thought processes. In addition to impeachment, the thing people are talking about all the time is filibuster. So I thought it would be a really good idea. We thought it would be a really good idea to discuss what the heck is that?
Right.
Why do we have it?
I think people are familiar with the filibuster. They've seen what happens. We've seen it happen. I think people are probably most familiar with Merrick Garland and with them using it to obstruct various things. But the filibuster. Let's just do a real quick history of it, if you don't mind. It was never intended to be it was never in the Constitution. Okay, it was not a fundamental
No.
part of the Constitution. In fact, the Federalist paper writers, both James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, did not want
Right.
this in the
Nope.
Constitution because they saw what could potentially happen. In fact, James Madison is quoted as saying that it would give the minority power in the Senate, which is never designed to have. The Senate
Right.
is designed to be a majority, 51%, not a supermajority. That's for the House, whatnot. The
Right.
Senate was, and that was never intended to.
Right. James Madison did not want anything like the filibuster. He wanted it to be a simple majority rules. The people elect, well, now, back then, the senators were not elected. Now they are elected. So it is the simple majority of the elected people of the body of the United States. And in some instances, because of population growth, the Senate isn't really a good reflection of the United States in some ways. In other ways, it is. But
It leads
uh,
right. It
you
leads
have
conservative. There's a
right. It
4.5% margin of conservativeness to the Senate.
right. So we have to think about how the framers of the Constitution and the framer of the Senate, that would be James Madison, President Madison, um, who wasn't president at the time that the Senate was conceived. But we have to think about what the intent was. And the filibuster, Murray, came in early on, but it
Can
was
I can
so
I just
seldom
point something
used.
out here?
Sure.
Those that are the biggest jackasses in exploiting and destroying what the Senate original intention are also the ones who claim to be originalists for the Constitution. So
Oh,
I don't know how that works. It's like you have to change the intention of the Senate, but you decided that you're going to keep the intention of the Constitution. Like you can't have it both ways. You either have to pick one or the other.
the hypocrisy is never lost on me, Murray, or
I
most other
know, I
people.
know. It is banana pants that it is
Yes.
always there. And our the founders knew this. Okay, guys. The founders knew this was coming. They saw Mitch McConnell down the road. 200 years in the future. They knew that it could be exploited, and that was never the intent. So we never had the intent of it. And then filibusters were used, but they weren't used very often. And when it
No.
really gained a lot of notoriety was right before World War One, when Woodrow Wilson wanted to send the military to help protect our ships from German attack boats,
Right.
and the bill was filibustered, and it was not allowed to move forward. So that's where they came in with the Rule 22.
Well, the other thing I think about how most people picture the filibuster, Marie, and we'll come back to 22, Rule 22 here in a minute. But do you remember that movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
Yes, with Jimmy
And Jimmy
Stewart.
Stewart stands up and he's reading from a book and he finally collapses 24 hours later. I'm sorry. I do love that movie. I love that movie. And when I was running for office, a supporter of mine wanted to have a Heidi goes to Springfield, Mr. Smith goes to Washington type of party. And we didn't end up getting it done. I was just so busy walking my feet off. Anyway, but but most people think of the filibuster as being something remarkable, where people have to get out there and talk about their point.
And that is no longer the case. At one time, it
exhausted.
was. You were required to be on
Yeah.
the floor. You were required to speak your case. There was debate that was ensued, and you might potentially change someone's mind. Well, the catch-22, Rule 22, came up, and it was that one senator should not have been able to hold the entire safety of the nation hostage. So they said, okay,
Right.
well, if a supermajority, 2/3 of the Senate says, hey, we are gonna, you're done, we don't care, then great. You could
Yep.
shut that person down. Well,
Right.
that even became very difficult to achieve. And so, somewhere in the 60s, after Strom Thurman objected to, basic human rights for all freaking humans, we moved to the number being 60 senators. And that's where we are at right now. And why, even though the intent of the Senate, the structure of the Senate was to be majority rule, 51, we now have a situation where you can't even propose legislation. Any senator can filibuster it.
Right.
And here's the thing, it's not just filibustering it, like you said, standing on the Senate floor and Jimmy Stewart. And it's not even that. Every filibuster challenge, formal challenge, requires 30 hours of debate. So it takes about 30 hours to go through the whole process when a senator initiates the filibuster process. 30 hours at a minimum. So
Yeah.
that stalls something from moving forward for that much time.
Murray, you touched a little bit on Strom Thurman, and I want to talk a little bit about how the filibuster wasn't really a thing until Strom Thurman. And it was used very sporadically. But once Strom Thurman, and I give Biden great props for being able to speak at his funeral, because I would have just kicked his casket, because he was such a racist. But who apparently had a change of view in his 90s or whatever. But what happened with him is that he filibustered the Civil Rights Act and kept it from being voted on, prevented it from being enacted, because the filibuster rose up out of the racist South.
Hey,
And
Heidi.
Yeah.
Why do you think? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes, it did. It rose up from the racist South. The filibuster is rooted in racism. It's rooted in the control of a small minority that doesn't represent Americans.
Nope.
Controlling the majority body. And it is that way. Our nation was founded on that. Our democracy was founded on that. Our legislation is founded on that. And this allows it to perpetuate, like Strom Thurman.
right.
It
That's
takes
right.
the ability away for genuine discourse and thoughtful discussion about legislation that could be beneficial. And we know that there are two chitty bang bang workarounds that the Senate has. So instead of getting rid of the filibuster, it's so horrible, right? The filibuster is this awful demon thing that stops any legislation.
Right.
But we can use it if it involves the budget, which you can tie almost anything to a budget. And two, we can use it to confirm appointees, to confirm anyone below the Supreme Court. So if we can use it for those two things, what are the two things that Republicans care about?
Oh, that would be the budget in the Supreme Court and backloading all the judges.
Taxes and court representation. So all of the legislation that could benefit Americans' lives, including green energy legislation, including immigration legislation, healthcare legislation, all of these things could make our lives better, gets killed because of a small group of racist assholes and the system that allowed them to thrive.
You know, Murray, I even think about the first 2 years of Obama, okay, the first 2 years of the Obama administration, and I would argue that the last real piece of legislation that got through the Senate was the ACA, and then nothing until the CARES Act, which was a deeply flawed act. I mean, deeply, deeply flawed act. It was necessary at the time in April when it was put out there. But the filibuster has obstructed the work of the people to circumvent the Democratic president and to make sure that the Republican president that just left office got everything he wanted. And who was in charge of the Senate in those 10 years, Murray? Who was in charge of the Senate? Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell. So we're not getting the work of the people, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting the decisions of Mitch McConnell are being passed into law. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It only matters what Mitch McConnell wants.
And Heidi, you're absolutely right. The filibuster prevents the average senator from bringing bills to the floor. The filibuster prevents discussion. It prevents societal change. But it's also a benefit, okay? And I don't understand why Democrats don't get this. It works in conservatives' favor in every way. They use it to obstruct, or they can use it to force every possible way that you can imagine. It benefits them. So I find it so incredibly hard to believe that the Democrats are not willing to say, okay, it's our turn, because they do. Democrats clearly have a mandate. You have the House, you have the presidency, you have the Senate. So because you have everything right now, use it. Because, the way the Senate is set up, our whole system is jacked up. You have to get people will never want, people typically don't want things taken away from them. And I think that's part of why the Republicans want the filibuster. Because if we don't have it, then legislation can get passed and they'll have to provide services for people. Once people start to understand that they should be given basic fundamental things like clean drinking water and a decent wage, they just get greedy. Okay, and then all bets are off.
Well, and isn't that the lesson McConnell learned under the first 2 years of Obama? Once you give people the ability to have health care, they don't want to give it up. Because part of his talking point, the part of the Republican talking point is, we'll take abortion, which under ACA allowed women control of their medical health, including pregnancy prevention. Once you take that vote getter and money getter out of the Republican vernacular, there's a huge issue. So while abortion rates drop from the ACA, McConnell's like, that'll never happen again. We'll never give them another thing that's positive that a Democrat does.
And so you're right, Heidi. He doesn't want to have anyone on his party work successfully with the president, because if he can hold them from working and be bipartisan, then he can make it look like the presidency is a failure in order to keep control.
Isn't that exactly what he did?
It's
with
power.
Isn't that exactly what I will make sure he's a one-term president. Well, he did his damnedest, didn't he? But the people are like, hey, we really like healthcare. We really like this. And they reelected Obama. Now, he got his dream fulfilled when Trump got elected, because he elected a stupid puppet man with an overinflated ego, that as long as McConnell stroked that ego in the manner he wanted, he could do whatever and say, here's your judicial appointment list from the Federalist Society, right? Here's the list of who we're going to appoint. You appoint them. I'll make sure they get through the Senate. Mm-hmm. And McConnell was able to backstack our courts. Now, it didn't work in Trump's favor when he was trying to overturn a free and fair election. But what is it going to hurt down the road? I mean, what are the most of us going to have to give up because the minority of us made the decisions
And that's
for the entire planet?
exactly, that's the whole point. Heidi, you are so incredibly sorry. My nose got itchy and hit my mic. You are so right
I
on.
know. I'm like,
It's that we are always stuck at the mercy of the tiny power minority. You know, the nation wants background checks. Let's take guns, for example. The nation has wanted background checks. 75% of American firearm owners want universal background checks.
right.
And our politicians won't give it to them.
Nope.
And
Nope.
you have to say, well, why won't our politicians give it to them? If everybody wants it, clearly bipartisan, all the voters want it, because they know they don't have to face the voters' repercussions because they have the filibuster. Because they can say, oh, well, we couldn't do anything because they had the, they filibustered it. Or oh, we tried to filibuster it and we just couldn't get it to stop. It's a beautiful little excuse nugget that can be pulled out and twisted every way imaginable.
And Murray, I'm going to go a little bit further here and say that they wouldn't have their intimidation troops that the Boogaloo Boys, the QAnon, the Proud Boys, all of those little racist little subsets that are allowed to exist because the work of the Senate to squash those cannot be done. And those are the same groups, these small, minute people that prevent 2A legislation from going through, not the most of it, just a few of us, that are internal terrorists that are willing to terrorize people for their gun rights, unalienable rights, which as a gun owner I find to be offensive.
Think about it. The only reason that they have those beliefs is because they were told to have those beliefs. That we created this idea. We are in the shit show we're in because of us. We created this problem. Yeah. We created where we are. If you want to know why executive orders and the power of the presidency has expanded exponentially over the last 20 years because of obstructionists in Congress. Because it is, I guess it is better to enact nothing than to take a stand and make something better. Is that where we are now?
The problem with these presidential executive orders, Murray, we watched this with Obama, had to go to that because of the obstruction in the Senate through the filibuster.
Trump came in and Jesus Christ.
So then when Trump came in, he did away with all of those executive orders. Anything that had Obama on it, he erased. And now we're saying, then Trump put in harmful, horrible, racist policy, including dropping white supremacy from watch groups from the FBI and CIA. He dropped those via presidential order. He put up these horrible detention camps separating families at the border.
He banned people from Arabic countries, from Muslim countries.
Only some.
Right.
Only some Muslim countries.
But it gave him all of this power, and then it remained unchecked. So everything we do has a connection, and we need to make sure that the choices that we're making going forward, because so much needs restructuring. We saw the things that are horrible, and the Senate actually has an opportunity to maybe be proactive as opposed to inactive. They have a chance to rewrite the rules of the filibuster, maybe encouraging still a debate, but actually having to be on the floor and talking. And there are things I think that we can do that would make it a better situation than what it is, because it is the minority party is ruling, and the minority party here is the ultra-conservative, right-wing white supremacists. And that's not who represents our country.
That isn't our country, Murray. And the fact that we have two Democrats that have gone on record of saying, look, we had to use a filibuster to prevent things under Trump, which very few things got picked up from the hopper and brought to the floor in the first place, because no senator can initiate those legislation. It has to come through the president of the Senate, Mitch McConnell. So we have 2 Democratic senators that are like, well, it was good for us then, so we're going to let them have it now. No, Manchin. No, Cinema. It is not right.
And
we
to
have
that,
to start to do the work of the people, not the work of the will of the wisp.
can I just ask, why is it an all or nothing proposition all the time? Either we have the filibuster or we don't. We have modified the filibuster multiple times throughout history. Maybe we should modify it again. Let's modify it to make it fit the situation and make it more fair. But again, they will never let you do that. You know, Mitch McConnell was filibustering getting rid of the filibuster.
Everything.
How do you filibuster getting rid of the filibuster? Okay, there's so much secular redundancy in the procedures of Senate. And we talk a little bit about the mythology and how, the halls of Congress are so sacred. Well, forget about it, because they used to brawl on the House floor, right? We have made this mythology about American exceptionalism and that American democracy and everything Western is better. And in actuality, that's not necessarily the case.
I think not only is it,
it's like they buy their own story. They believe their own hype, right? Politicians believe their own hype, right? You can't go on the floor of the House unless you were granted extra permission by, like, the Pope himself or something. I don't know. But you're not allowed in places because of the ultimate respect, etc. Maybe that makes them feel empowered in a way that they shouldn't be.
Well, I know that there's a lot of talk about, let me make sure I get the words right, the cooling saucer.
Yes, yeah.
Number one, nobody pours a hot beverage into a saucer anymore and foofs it and then drinks it.
How do you try to drink it out of a saucer? I'd spill it.
Well, I've seen it done one time on the Andy Griffith Show. And
I'm gonna have to Google that shit. Somebody Google that for me and post a picture, would you?
If you get a steaming hot cup of coffee, isn't that the whole point? You want a hot cup of coffee, don't it? I mean, if you don't want it to cool down, you can just let it sit there for a little bit. But we keep getting that little scenario that it's this cooling saucer from the hot cup of coffee that is the House. Okay. Except that when you look at how the filibuster is used, it just destroys the cooling saucer of the Senate and makes it the Kelvinator of the Senate, which is not the purpose, right?
The whole system. Purpose. The fact that they have 6 years in office never lets them face the consequences of their decisions. The House has to face, if things go wrong and the Senate doesn't pass anything and you've made promises, you get voted out if you're in the House. You get 4 years if you're the president. But the Senate gets 6 years. So I think they are insulated, which only the intent is intelligent, kind of like the intent of a nonpartisan Supreme Court or judiciary. Yeah. But the intent, again, has been exploited. And if Democrats don't start looking, honestly, at this and say, okay, we know it's been exploited. How do we fix it without letting it become more exploited? We're screwed.
Right. Murray, all I can picture is, as Democrats, we try to be nice and we try to negotiate. And we negotiate ourselves right out of the legislative process. We negotiate ourselves out of doing the will of the people, of doing what's right, because there might be some backlash. Well, let me tell you, it's time that we start putting the will of the people, the good of the people, the good of the country first.
And Heidi, and that means I agree with you. Yeah, if they had to face the consequences of their actions, such as the debate, etc., as opposed to being able to use it as an obstructionist tool, I think you might see a very different Senate.
Right, right. You know, I think that if they would bother, try to think about how people are trying to live a life that has been so ruled by executive order, up and down, up and down. And we're seeing this up, down, up
It's not
cycle.
good for the republic. It's
No,
not good for
we
governing.
cannot rule by executive
And
order
then
because
it
we
takes,
watch.
and then it all ends up in the
Yeah.
courts. It takes it away from the
It ends up in
legislative.
the court.
And then guess what? The legislators get to
Why
go,
do we
well, it wasn't our fault. Yes, it was.
wasn't
It's
our
your
fault.
fault.
It is. And the filibuster makes it their fault. The fact that they buy into it, the fact that they don't try to change it, the fact that they allow it to continue is infuriating because all we did is we see Obama do something, Trump take it away, and Biden has to undo the mess by executive order from the Trump administration. Well, the next president we elect can go, you know what? I don't like anything Biden did, and take that all away.
Exactly. And then it ends up in the
It's just a roller
courts.
coaster.
And so the legislative
Yes,
process, they get away without doing anything. So I think it's an insanely weird cycle that we need to look at restructuring in a big way.
Yeah.
And there are so many other things.
big-
But we hope that today we kind of gave you an understanding a little bit more about the filibuster and why it is so messed up. And hopefully somebody can figure out how to fix it.
I hope so, Marie.
We love having you tune into us on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 o'clock Central Time. But if you miss us on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you can always catch us on Facebook because our videos are up there from our lives, as well as on YouTube. Every place you get your podcasts, Demcast USA and Heartland Mamas.
MAMAS.com. Thank you, everybody, for sharing our frustration today. I appreciate you tuning in. Marie and I will see you Thursday, and we've got another great show planned for you Thursday at 3. Remember, like, subscribe, and share. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.